Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to Dr. K and my fellow classmates of course PSYC826. My name is Matthew Uenking, and today we will be discussing a potential research opportunity for the Department of Psychology at Liberty University. Having watched some of the presentations of my classmates, I must say that I'm impressed with the quality of work produced, and I pray that God is with you all as we approach our integral dissertation phase of this program. My own research proposal for this class will focus on the topic of employee well-being and its relation to job performance. We will begin today's presentation on a research topic that interests me, and I hope that this investigation and its purpose becomes clear as we progress through this presentation. The nature of human individual well-being is personally relevant to all of us, and it is essential to how we operate in society. This internal and physical presentation of well-being influences how we act and perform in the presence of others. For example, in the workplace, it may be clear to see that someone is having a bad day or a good day. Those emotions and how a person is feeling significantly impacts how they feel and how they perform within the workplace, given the tasks that they are assigned. Research on this topic is not sparse nor limited in nature, but rather presents a complex web of employee well-being and employee performance. An investigation into this research topic after the events of the COVID-19 pandemic will help to shed further light on the implications of well-being in the workplace and the potential impact of job performance. I will be clear the purpose of the current study is to investigate the relationship between employee well-being and job performance. While I have seen that the biblical integration slide was included towards the end of some of my fellow classmates' presentations, I thought it may be refreshing to present the biblical foundation for this research proposal towards the beginning. Neither is wrong, I just thought it might be refreshing to have a little change. The 3 verses provided here on the slide present how peace of mind and well-being is viewed in Scripture. Moreover, these verses extend beyond the bounds of research and can provide wisdom and discernment for any life event. Not only can these verses be applied here in this context, but I hope these verses can help to provide each of you comfort as we wrap up this course and move forward on our educational and professional journeys. The application of our faith is relevant in any and every life situation. Personally, I know that the Word of God has helped me to overcome many challenges, especially within this program and in previous educational journeys, whether it's for my bachelor's or my master's degree. As known, the Word of God can be used as a tool to navigate the difficult waters in the working environment. So we will start from the book of John, starting in chapter 16, where it is written, "I have told you all this, that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world." A personal favorite verse of mine, Philippians 4:6, "Don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all that He has done." Finally, from the book of Isaiah, chapter 26, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." We will begin by discussing the workplace. I will not speak for all of you, but it would be fair to assume that our professional careers have presented some interesting workplace environments. Research on this topic has shown that mental health and well-being is a serious consideration for both organizations and researchers as they look to understand how employees feel and operate in their working environment. Kevin Kellaway spoke at the Canadian Psychology Association and stated that there was an unprecedented concern for issues related to workplace mental health. He would go on to say that the events of the COVID-19 pandemic have increased the concerns of employee mental health, which is normal, given the amount of change and turbulence that the pandemic caused to the modern workplace. Research by Kellaway and his colleagues highlighted that a psychologically healthy workplace is evident from 5 key considerations: employee involvement, work-life balance, recognition, growth and development, and finally, health and safety. Secondly, Nielsen and her colleagues conducted a review of the literature on 84 quantitative studies and found that psychologically healthy workplaces are evident from organizations that promote and prioritize employee well-being. Organizations are starting to realize that this is a serious issue that needs to be put at the forefront if organizations are able to be successful. A little side note for some of you that are conducting research in other areas. The work of Callaway extends to leadership as well and other organizational constructs, so it may be beneficial to look at some of his work if you are planning to conduct research on the topics of leadership and mental health. Now we will shift to more literature on the topic of mental health in the workplace. First, Slimp and Vela Broderick noted that workplace well-being is reflected in work-related affect and job satisfaction. Work-related affect may be illustrated by the emotional experiences that an employee has at work, whether positive or negative. These two researchers were looking to optimize employee mental health by investigating the connections between intrinsic needs, job crafting, and employee well-being. Next, de Graaf and his colleagues conducted a survey in the Netherlands on a sample of 4,715 workers to highlight the relevancy of mental health disorders in the workplace. They found that employees with mental health disorders were absent, on average, 10.5 more days. They exhibited 8 days of reduced qualitative functioning and 12 total work loss days. These numbers highlight the impact of mental health and the cost that occurs to organizations. Next, Hammer and her research team presented the complex picture of the work environment and individual employee well-being by noting that when work conditions are unfavorable and psychosocial hazards/risks are high, it can lead to poor mental and physical health, which is exemplified through psychological strain, burnout, and depression. Finally, Farley and his team reviewed a total of 68 studies and found that employee well-being is impacted by interactions with supervisors and colleagues and can negatively be impacted by workplace bullying. What is clear from this research is that mental health and employee well-being is a complex dynamic that occurs within the workplace and needs further research to understand the mechanisms behind it. Now we will discuss happy employees within the workplace. I will be the first to admit that when I am happy at work, I feel more productive and ready to take on any work task. While this is anecdotal, the emotion of happiness and its expression in the workplace is well documented within the literature. For example, Boehm and Lai by Morsky wanted to answer the question, does happiness promote career success? They found that happy employees tend to perform better on assigned tasks than their less happy peers and are more likely to offer social support to their colleagues. Moreover, they found evidence that happiness is not only correlated with success, that happiness precedes measures of success, and that the expression of positive affect can lead to improved workplace outcomes. Fredrickson conducted a similar line of research by looking at the role of positive emotions in positive psychology. He noted that positive affect due to positive emotions, such as happiness, can help individuals engage with their environment and partake in activities. This further supports the notion that happiness and a positive well-being can lead to optimal workplace outcomes and overall professional success. So far, it is clear that an individual's well-being and mental health is a significant variable for consideration when looking at how they operate in their workplace setting. Now we will begin to dive deeper and look at how employee well-being may be connected to job performance. This association has become a prominent topic within the industrial psychology field. Crampenzano and Wright, two very prominent researchers on this topic, evaluated the happy, productive worker thesis, which argues that happy employees illustrate higher levels of job-related performance behaviors as compared to unhappy employees. Secondly, Crampenzano and Wright conducted more research that showed through two studies that the effect of employee well-being was stronger than the effect of job satisfaction on job performance ratings. Moreover, the variable of psychological well-being was more predictive of job performance than job satisfaction. Finally, research by Wright and Bonnet, conducted via a 2-year field study on a sample of 112 managers, showed that a significant bivariate relationship exists between psychological well-being, job satisfaction, and job performance with voluntary employee turnover. From this research, the researchers also found that well-being moderated the relation between job satisfaction and job separation, such that job satisfaction was most strongly related to a turnover when employee well-being was low. Again, the cost of poor mental health and well-being to organizations is brought to the forefront. A picture is beginning to be painted of the association between employee well-being and job performance, given the literature provided here. This picture is not a clear one, but rather one full of colors and details that makes it interesting nonetheless. More research has shown that employee well-being is tied to further organizational outcomes. For example, Spritzer and Porath noted in the Harvard Business Review that employee well-being is a crucial tool in evaluating the success and sustainment of organizations around the world. Secondly, Dana and Griffin, who conducted a review of the literature on employee and well-being, asserted that the topic of health and well-being in the workplace is necessary to investigate due to its impact on the financial health and profitability of an organization. Furthermore, these researchers noted that the individual emotional, physical, mental, or social experiences at work not only affect their disposition at work, but also have potential to spill over into non-work domains. The publication of this article in 1999 speaks to the relevancy and strength of this research topic. Lastly, Avey and colleagues investigated the role of psychological capital, also known as PSYC8, which is illustrated through efficacy, optimism, hope, and resilience. These cognitive resources can help employees accomplish tasks and goals, and research on a sample of 280 workers showed that PSYC8 was indeed related to measures of well-being over time. We will now shift gears and mention the role of teleworking and new ways of working. As many of you may recall, the events of the COVID-19 pandemic forced many of us to adapt to more isolated means of accomplishing tasks and goals. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic shifted the organizational landscape and required adaptation from individuals. For example, I can distinctly remember being an undergrad, working on my bachelor's in psychology, and shifting from my preferred in-person traditional classroom setting to a more remote setting due to social distancing and whatnot. This required me to change my mindset, despite being discouraged and stressed about the transition on how assignments, presentations, and exams would pan out for the rest of that spring semester. Luckily, I made it through, but this personal experience was certainly not isolated in nature, as many of you may have had similar experiences, whether academically or professionally. The pandemic created new ways of working for employees. The literature speaks to the development of new ways of working via teleworking and the impact of the pandemic on the individual worker. Firstly, Andrulli and Gerons showed from a sample of Dutch workers that higher levels of new ways of working were related to higher job-related affective well-being and to more feelings of positive well-being. Secondly, Krishnan and colleagues investigated the impact of the pandemic on the workplace and the development of workaholism. Workaholism is defined by the work of Oates in 1971 and is characterized by persistent thoughts about work when not working, feeling compelled to work due to internal pressures, and working beyond what is expected. This negative reality has become ever more common due to the pandemic and can cause individuals to experience severe health problems and depressive symptoms. Next, Anderson and colleagues conducted a study on 102 U.S. government employees and found that employees who teleworked experienced more job-related positive affective well-being as compared to employees who worked in the traditional office setting. Finally, Parent, Lamarche, and Boulay found that variables such as work-life balance, marital tension, and workload were associated with lower levels of well-being, while teleworking and income were associated with higher levels of well-being. Taken all together, from teleworking and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, a further investigation into the association between employee well-being and job performance could prove to be beneficial. Now the moment that we have all been waiting for. What is my research looking to investigate? My research question is centered on the question, is employee well-being related to job performance? Given the articles and research provided thus far, the relationship between the two variables is clear, but to what extent? Furthermore, are employee participant scores on the measure known as the Job-Related Affective Well-Being Scale, JAWS, associated with supervisor ratings? I will be clear that this is a replication of previous studies, and the purpose of this research is to provide a more comprehensive picture of the relationship between the two variables in a post-pandemic context. Now we will address the hypotheses for the current research study. Given the research question, there are two hypotheses provided, a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis asserts that there will be no statistically significant difference between employee well-being and job performance. The alternative hypothesis argues that there will be a statistically significant difference between employee well-being and job performance. The independent variable for the current study is reflected in employee well-being. As I was developing this research proposal, I came across the measure known as the Job-Related Affective Well-Being Scale, also known as JAWS. Having given a brief look at the purpose of this measure and what it looks to measure, I found it suitable to include as participants could respond in a self-report manner to questions of the JAWS measure to gauge their individual well-being in their workplace setting. Overall, the JAWS measure was developed from the work of Van Kattewyk and colleagues to investigate subjective employee well-being and the impact of job stressors. For any of you that may be curious, an example of an item from JAWS may ask employees to respond to the following statements, such as in item 19, where participants are to respond to the following statement: "My job made me feel frustrated." How a participant responds to that statement will be explained in more detail in the coming slides. While the independent variable of employee well-being is reflected through participant responses to the JAWS measure, I found it personally more difficult to nail down the dependent variable of job performance and how to evaluate evaluate it properly. Job performance could be reflected in a variety of different domains that occur within the workplace. While evaluating research on this construct, I came across the work of Kaya, who defined job performance as ratings on statements referring to overall effectiveness, performance, work reputation, or the sum of all these dimensions. In simpler terms, job performance ratings may be illustrated through how effectively an employee performs their job duties against established criteria or expectations. Given this information, the dependent variable of job performance will be measured using supervisor ratings of their subordinates. A measure is being devised that will consist of 10 items that will address the various components of job performance. Now that we have discussed the research question, the hypotheses, and the variables, it would be useful to address how I expect the direction of change to occur between the independent and dependent variables. If the alternative hypothesis is supported and a statistically significant relationship exists between the independent and dependent variables of employee well-being and job performance, then those employees who exhibit more positive well-being will tend to perform better than their counterparts. Let me be clear. By performing better, I mean that employees will find more success in the completion of their work tasks and responsibilities than employees who exhibit more negative well-being. The higher level of positive well-being will increase strongly with productive job performance, while the inverse will be true as well. This direction of change, with both variables increasing in the same direction, serves as a prediction rather than a concrete fact until the study is conducted. This prediction tends to align with the aforementioned happy productive worker thesis that was evaluated by the research team of Crampenzano and Wright in 2001, which was mentioned earlier. We will begin to look at how the current study will play out by addressing the methods for this research proposal. Participants for the current study will be sourced from faculty members here at Liberty University. Said participants may include associate professors, assistant professors, instructors, and/or professors on tenure. Given that the nature of this research is correlational, a minimum of 30 participants will be asked to participate. Finally, it is worth noting that the current study abides by the American Psychological Association ethical principles of psychologists and codes of conduct, specifically referencing Section 4, which pertains to privacy and confidentiality, and Section 8, which pertains to research and publication. On two of the previous slides, I briefly touched on both the independent and dependent variables of employee well-being and job performance respectively. But a further dive into how these variables will be scored will be included here on this slide. It was from the work of Van Kattewyk and colleagues that the development of the JAWS measure came to life. Once again, it is worth noting that the measure of JAWS asks participants to record their subjective experiences of emotion to workplace stressors over the past 30 days. Furthermore, JAWS is a self-report measure that consists of 30 items that follow a 5-point Likert scale, with scores of 1 reflecting that the participant never experiences that emotion, to scores of 5 reflecting that the participant experiences that emotion extremely often. 15 of the 30 items on the JAWS measure require reverse scoring because they address negative emotions. The items that require reverse scoring are provided here. As previously discussed, the dependent variable of job performance will be measured using supervisor ratings of their subordinates and a sample of faculty members at Liberty University. And by supervisor ratings, I mean department head ratings. You can use those terms interchangeably. The dependent variable of department head ratings will follow a 5-point self-report Likert scale with scores of 1 reflecting extremely unsatisfactory to scores of 5 reflecting extremely satisfactory job performance. A total of 10 items will be used to address the various aspects of job performance that will follow that 5-point Likert scale. The second measure, which focuses on the dependent variable of job performance, is a work in progress that is continually being reviewed and considered for improvement. A brief layout of the procedural format of the current study will now be discussed. As with any study, a consent form must first be signed for each participant. After 30 participants are collected and sign the consent form, the investigation will begin. Those 30 faculty members will answer the 30-item JAWS measure to evaluate the independent variable of employee well-being. It is worth noting that the timeline of the study will follow a typical college semester length of 15 to 16 weeks to incorporate time for the self-report and the department head ratings, which will come at the conclusion of the semester. A Pearson's R correlation will be conducted to evaluate the association between the two variables. At the conclusion of the data analysis, participants will also be provided with a debriefing form. The development of this research proposal was due to the personal research interests of employee well-being and job performance. Faculty members at Liberty University will represent the primary sample for the current study. Future studies could rely on the foundation of this proposal and could be applied into different workplace contexts that extend beyond the world of academia. The sample size of 30 participants, while applicable, may be extended in future studies to help broaden the findings to represent the overall population. The generalizability of the findings could be expanded by increasing that sample size. While reading the various articles on this topic, the variable of job satisfaction tended to be relevant in the discussion. Future research could incorporate this variable of job satisfaction to provide a more comprehensive picture of employee well-being and its influence on job performance and job satisfaction. Furthermore, and overall, research on this topic shows that many organizational constructs are involved in this complex web, including employee well-being, job performance, job satisfaction, work-family conflict, turnover rate, and more. The primary purpose of this research proposal is to investigate the potential association between the organizational constructs of employee well-being and job performance. While research has shown that a relationship exists between the two variables, the events of the pandemic and the shift to the organizational landscape highlights a change that could shed light on this complex dynamic. A replication of this study is thus provided here to gauge if any changes have occurred due to the changes of the workplace setting. At the conclusion of this presentation, this research proposal will be submitted to the Institutional Review Board, IRB, at Liberty University. While we wait on a decision from the IRB team, my research team and I will look and prep for the next steps. If approval is granted for said proposal, the current study will begin with the participant sampling and will progress with the dispersion of the consent form. I would like to thank Dr. K and my fellow classmates from the course PSYC826 for their attendance, support, and guidance throughout the duration of this course. Moreover, I pray that God is with you all as you continue on this doctoral journey and in your professional careers. Thank you for your time. Here is the first list of references used to develop this research proposal. Here is the second list of references used for this research proposal. Here is the third list of references used for this research proposal. Here is the fourth and final list of references used for this research proposal.